Hello, hello. My name is Melanie Chance, and I'm your podcast host. And today I have Maggie Dasso. We are the Family Restoration Center. Today we're going to be talking about the book, The Bait of Satan. Maggie, let's talk about The Bait of Satan.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast. I've been looking forward to getting to sit down and chat about this because this study in particular is one that, you would hope that Bible studies would change your life. That's kind of the point of doing a Bible study, is that you grow from it. But this one in particular has been really helpful to me. So
this will be your second or third time doing this study.
Well, this will be technically the second time I've gone through this study. First time here at the Family Restoration Center, though. So in the fall, we had a ladies' Bible study, and we were doing a study from John Bevere, who is the author of The Bait of Satan, but it was called The Awe of God. So it was a study on the fear of the Lord and how to walk in a godly fear and not a man-made fear. So this will be the second time we've done a study, first time on The Bait of Satan.
Okay. And so when you talk about a Bible study, is this a Bible study for anyone who wants to join? Is this study just for women only? When's it going to take place? Let's just be very open with it. When is it going to take place? Let's just open it up.
Yeah, so we are going to start March 7th, so that will be coming up very soon. We're going to go from March 7th, which is a Friday, and we're going to do every Friday for 6 weeks, so until April 11th. And it's targeted for the women this time around. This study in particular is not a women's Bible study. It's for anyone, but we wanted to have an environment for the ladies to come and create a community and grow together. And there are a lot of ladies from the last Bible study that we had that are we've made friendships and community with, and so we're going to continue that on. So it's targeted towards the women of our area. We haven't had childcare. We're working on that, but so if anything changes with that, we'll give that information. But for right now, we have a place for kiddos, but no supervision. So mostly it's for the ladies. It starts at 1:00 on those Fridays, and we try to get done by 3. That is the goal.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. It's very ish. We're very 1-ish to 3-ish. We want to respect people's time with getting kids from school and whatnot. So we do the bulk of all of our study within that first hour. We go over the video, and then we do our main study topic, and then there's lots of discussion. And so, if anybody has to filter out after that, and other times we stick around and, hash things out and get to chat. And so it's really great that way, but targeted 1 to 2 p.m., 3 p.m. So
you're a great host. I've been able to hang out with Maggie. For anybody listening, I've been able to hang out with Maggie the last few weeks, and let me tell you, she makes some good coffee, some great iced coffee, and she puts on some really good events, and we have some great talks and great chats, and it's a really nice girlfriend time.
I agree. I've really enjoyed our time together, and you've made it so easy. It's been one of those things where you feel like you know somebody way longer than you've actually known them. So, I love to love on people. I love to give to the givers too, and you're such a giving person. It's so easy to have a friendship. So it's a lot of fun.
And so, Maggie, you and your family, your husband Ryan, and your 3 boys, Willem, Owen, and Benjamin.
Nicely done.
Thank you. You guys are so involved here at the Family Restoration Center here in Stockton, Missouri. What is it that you do? Because you've been involved here for a few years now.
Right. It started back, I was attending a Bible study before there was a Family Restoration Center. It was a gathering of believers for prayer. And so we were living in Monette at the time, and I was driving up once a week to come to the prayer meeting, and it kind of just evolved from there. When we became more involved, it was harder because of the distance to be consistent with everything that we were doing up here. And then whenever we moved to Bolivar, that's when we could really get involved in what was going on. So that's when the Family Restoration Center became a non-for-profit, and we really kind of hit the ground running. So Ryan and I are part of the board. I'm technically, I think, the secretary, and we do kind of assignment-driven things around here. So there's the basic things. We have a Sunday evening worship that we lead. Ryan and I lead with the boys on Sundays at 6 p.m. And then kind of just there's all kinds of different events that go on either throughout the week or one-off events. And so we are so grateful to have Kenneth and Cheryl Thornton as, our leaders in that. So we just kind of, fall in line and like, what are orders? Like, what do we got on their plates this week? And they make it really easy to work with them on those things because Cheryl's on top of stuff. So it's busy around here. We've got lots of different things going on. We've been working on some children's rooms for parents and families when they come to the different events to have a place for their kiddos. We've kind of got a youth room getting, put together, and a children's room, and like a cry room kind of area. And we just kind of, it's that jack of all trades kind of feel around here.
Well, and I know Cheryl and Ken just love you too as well. They love your whole family. But
they're like family. They really, they are.
Absolutely. Well, so we're going to dive deep for our listeners to the bait of Satan. And I know you're really passionate about this study, and I'm excited to do this study with you. So the bait of Satan, and it's by John Bevere. Did I say that correct?
John Bevere.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And it delves into the, identity as the root causes of offense among believers. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's touch on that.
So I first read this book years ago, but I was given this book many years before that. My mom had given me this book, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll get to that. And then, so 8 years later, it was still sitting on my shelf, and I finally pulled it off the shelf and read it. And I was disappointed in myself that I hadn't read it sooner because of the amount of freedom that I received through reading through this book, because it's more than it's not a self-help book. It goes deeper than that. It takes biblical truth and it helps you apply it to your life. So it's not just telling you should just try harder, or you should just, you need to fix this yourself. It really pulls you into what is the truth of God's word, and then helps you get the tools needed to apply that to your life in a really healthy way. So it was liberating to go through this book. And I didn't have the study guide at the time. It was the book itself. But I was, of course, the thing about offense is that we don't really ever see it as offense. So one of the things that John Bevere is, right out of the gate, he helps define what offense is. And then you can see, you can take that lens and look at your life and realize, oh, maybe I was offended in this circumstance. And I didn't realize that my anger towards that person, it was seated in offense. It was seated in a hurt. And so it helps identify those things in your life so that you can actually start healing from those places.
Wow. So how long did it take you to read this book at first? And did you find yourself having to go back to these different situations and having to go to people?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
There's a lot of, we'll see, how long did it take me to read the book? It was a pretty quick read because it just kept pulling me through. It's like, I need the answers to this. I want to know more. I need to, and so it's not a difficult book to read in that the content pulls you through. It's a very hard book to read in that it's a mirror. You see yourself kind of, in that raw way. And so it's humbling, I should say that. I, again, did not think I was a very offended person. And then I realized I am offended over everything.
Oh,
And
that can be hard. Yeah. This says, how can holding on to offense damage relationships within a faith community? This reads, oh, that must have been hard to really take that in and to really like, oh, well, because even myself, I'm like, oh, I'm not offended. I'm not offended. Really, if we take a step back, I think we all can admit, if we're being honest within ourselves, we probably all get offended pretty easily.
And if you're not getting offended for yourself, you can also get offended for other people. So it's not just personal offenses. You can be offended for somebody you've never even met before, but those seeds still grow, and it's producing fruit in your life. And so
there's spiritual consequences.
You bet. And which means if there's a negative side to that means that there's a right way to do it that will produce good fruit. And so what John Bevere does is he really just lays it all out, call it what it is, stop hiding behind it. He goes through talking about that there's the reason the book is called The Bait of Satan is because offense is the bait within the trap. And so when we take the bait, then we're trapped. Then we get sucked into responding in anger. We get into responding in bitterness. We start to have these things that start to take root in us. So offense just gets us to take that bait and get stuck in all of these really the wrong thinking, basically. If you're a believer, the scripture tells us to think on these things, right? It talks about the good things that we're supposed to be focused on. And offense takes our attention off of those good things, and we get stuck.
Okay. So you said this book can be for anybody. So in what ways can church leaders foster an environment that minimizes offense?
One of the things about offense is that oftentimes we don't label it offense. We feel right. And so if I feel right, then you're wrong. And so then
you're exactly
you
right.
need to change, and I'm fine. And so communicating when something does hurt you, or say, I heard you say this, I understood it to mean that. And so being open about those things with one another in love, not to point fingers and to put blame, but to actually say, I don't want to misunderstand you. And if you really meant that, then can we talk about how that was hurtful? And so there's an example when we were attending a church, and I was discerning about some things that weren't settling right in my spirit. I was like, I don't like this or that's going on, or I don't like the method being employed to get a result. And instead of taking that to prayer, I just got really bitter about it, and I got frustrated. Like, why is this happening again? And so I was just getting really stuck. That's kind of my. Whenever I have emotions that are too big, or feelings that are too big, or thoughts that are too big, I get stuck. I just can't move forward, can't, fix it.
You dwell on it.
Yeah, it's just, there's no growth for sure. And so I would tell my husband, I was like, I don't like any of these things. I feel like this isn't healthy. And I said, I think we should leave. And he's like, Lord has not told me that we're supposed to leave this church yet. And I was like, are you sure? Are you sure? Because it'd be more comfortable. I would prefer, being somewhere where I didn't have this friction against me. And so it wasn't an exterior. I didn't express it outwardly towards anybody, but it's the inside. Like, I felt all those things. I felt frustrated, and I felt like what I was seeing was true, but I didn't know what to do about it. And so then you start doing the blame game of, everybody else needs to change, and why can't they see what's going on? And so I became offended for the truth that we weren't walking in the truth. And so I felt right and justified in my offense because I felt like I was right. The Lord brought some teaching into my life alongside The Bait of Satan as well. It's actually another book by John Bevere called Undercover, which is talking about the covering of authority and how important it is in our lives. And so these two different lessons are kind of like paralleling each other on this specific walk that I'm in right now. And I was so frustrated. And so what the Lord said to me was, he said, you're using your gift of discernment to judge and be condemning. He said, I gave you that gift for intercession.
Wow.
You can see something that they can't see in themselves. So pray for them. Like, that's the whole point. If you love them, which I wasn't walking in love, because if I was, I would have been praying for them. He said, you need to pray for them. And so I started doing that, and I asked the Lord, forgive me for using that gift inappropriately as a weapon instead of a tool. And then the Lord put it on my heart. He's like, you need to go to them, the pastors, and tell them that you have this in your heart and that you ask for their forgiveness. And I was like, Lord, they don't know.
No, yeah, like whoa, why are we doing this?
This would be like opening a big can of worms. I don't want them to become, of course you make it sound real, religious. I don't want them to become offended.
Yeah, but it's not about religion, it's about relationship.
Exactly. And the Lord was specifically told me, he's like, you need to go to them and you need to apologize.
Yeah.
And so it was a Wednesday after church, and I asked for the pastor and his wife to step aside after everybody was gone, and we worked together all the time. I did, all kinds of work with the church and whatnot, and again, always cordial towards them, but it was the inner part that was the problem. And so I told them, I said, I've not been honoring your authority, and I've been offended in different ways, and I was wrong to walk in that. Would you forgive me? And they're staring at me like, I had no idea. And it's that moment of tension of, how are they going to, receive this? And they were so gracious about it. And they forgave me, and they kind of that quizzical, like, I don't know what's going on here, but yes, we forgive you. And from that point on, there was a slow growth. And it was the Lord had turned my heart from being offended at them to truly loving them. And then you saw the fruit of love. You saw the fruit of kindness, of true kindness, caring about how things affected them, caring about their roles as our pastors, and lifting them up in prayer, not just judging them and saying, well, you should have done this different or should have done that different, but truly being part of the body of Christ and lifting them up. And so offense is such a thief because it keeps us in the mentality of, I'm right, they're wrong, they need to change. All the while, love is saying, we can all grow, but I can grow. I can grow in my love towards them, and we can support one another and grow up into that together. And so, then we get to this place where the pastor has asked me to do this study, the bait of Satan, with the church. And when 2020 happened and everything shut down, I would go to his house and he and his wife and I, we would sit down around the table and we would live, do Facebook Live, these lessons, these studies, and we'd have everybody joining us, on Facebook Live. And so the starting point where I was in so much offense and hurt and anger and bitterness, to when I laid all of that down, it's incredible again to see how much we forfeit when we walk in offense. It is, again, such a thief. And so when we look at it that way, instead of I'm protecting myself from something, we can see it's like, no, I'm withholding the goodness of God in my life and in others' lives whenever I hold on to offense instead.
Absolutely. What a testimony. Thank you for sharing that. So, and I think we're all guilty of it.
Oh, yes, it is. Offense is the most, especially within the church, one of the most common reasons you see people church hopping and moving and getting hurt is because we step into the trap of offense.
Well, I think as humans, and especially as adults, we've been hurt so many times. We have calluses. Mm-hmm. And so we go in with so many barriers. And while we just go in, you said church hopping. Mm-hmm. So we put on we go into a church and we decide, well, this church is going to treat me the same way that this church did. So we already assume that these pastors are like these other pastors. So it's at no fault of our own, maybe, but it is really our own fault.
Well, again, it's, you don't fault a child for getting a math problem wrong if you've never taught them how to work that type of equation before, right? Like I don't expect, my kindergartner to understand multiplication. And so what this does, the reason I'm so excited about doing this study is that this is the tool.
So you just strip it down.
Yeah.
So the study guide that the book comes with said the bait of Satan. It comes with another book, and it's a study guide, and is a study guide that everybody's going to do together. Do you take the study guide home and do it?
It's a little bit of both. So there's some group time within the study book, and then there is daily devotionals that you can do as well. So it's not, you don't have to have the study guide to be a part of the Bible study we're doing, but it really helps to kind of parse out things and organize your thoughts. And, I have notes. I didn't have a study guide at the time, but I had written a bunch of notes down, and I've been able to go back and read those notes and see the growth throughout the years of the things that I struggled with at that time versus, the different level of things that I might, struggle with right now, that there's still growth in that. And so it's not about not addressing offense in our lives. Like, there will always be an offense. Scripture tells us we will always have an opportunity to be offended. What do we do with those opportunities? So there, from the point of this knowledge, this wisdom when I received it, to today, there is so much growth, and I don't bite the bait on so many things. And then there are other times where I realize I am waist deep in offense, and I didn't even realize it. And so then
You just talked about that today.
Yep. And so you have to go, okay, time out. I recognize what this is now. Because the thing about deception is it's deceiving. So,
Yes, it is.
there are
Yes.
times where we just don't see it. And that's why community is so important, is that we can lovingly say, hey, I don't know if you can see this, but I can see the fruit of offense. Like, it's not good. It's not helping you, and it's not helping your community. It's not helping the people around you. Offense affects everyone. It affects the person being offended, and it affects everyone around you too, because again, there's fruit that accompanies offense. And if you think of, I have to always have like word pictures and stuff. And so if I can think of, do you know like what a potato smells like when it's rotting? It's offensive. Like, it's awful. Like, that is offense to me now. Like, I try to like visualize that. That is offense. And I don't want that stench on me.
Oh, that's a good
And I
that's a
wouldn't
good
feed
one.
it to somebody.
Yeah.
You wouldn't feed somebody rotten fruit, right?
Yeah, and so think about it like when you're in a room and like two people don't get along, but you're like in the midst of that,
that tension.
Yeah.
It's bad fruit. And if we think about that, all of our actions are producing good fruit or bad fruit. Like, there's no middle ground.
So today, again, for listeners, we had what do we call that? What we did today?
I don't know. In between, I have tried so hard to figure out like little thing
What do we
to
call
it.
our girl time? We need to have a name for it.
We do. So if anybody has any ideas, we need some ideas. So between studies, we're doing one in the fall and one in the spring. In between those studies, once a month, we're getting together for coffee and snacks and all kinds of just fun girl time. And it's been a lot. I've really enjoyed it.
It's been a lot of fun.
It has. And so it's a way to stay connected. It's a way to
It's our
touch
community.
base. It is. So I don't know what we don't
We
know.
cry, we laugh.
It's true.
I
Yes.
mean, let me tell you, if everybody would just listen to us, we would have already fixed the world. Am I wrong?
So why nobody listens to us though.
I know, right? Like, come on, just show up to our meetings. But you had mentioned today, and she'd already done this study, when COVID was happening, but you had said that you had been taking offense to things, and you're like, whoa, why is this happening? Oh yeah, I'm about to do this study.
Yep. when we think of life as especially as believers, we're practicing. Like that's such an important position to have.
And
in life.
you use that concept a lot, even with your boys.
Constantly using it with the boys, because whatever we practice, we get good at.
Yeah.
So why would we practice a bad attitude? We're going to get good at it. And then it's going to be even harder later on in life to undo that.
Yes.
So all the little things are accumulative, like they grow. And so I don't want to be a little offended, because I know that I will be practicing offense and I'm just going to get better at being offended. So it's one of those things where when we practice the right mentality, there's successes and there's failures in that. And so I think when you have the mentality of I'm practicing, you don't crumble at, like if you're a musician, you don't crumble at the wrong note, right? You go, okay, that was a wrong note. Let's try it again. Let's practice it again. Let's practice it with the right note. And you do it until that note becomes real, like a true note. And so that's how I see my walk with Christ you ask for forgiveness. It's like, Lord, forgive me for that. I didn't see it in the moment. Or maybe you do. Maybe it was a willful, no, I stomped my foot and said, I don't want to do it. And
yeah.
But when you come to him and say, Lord, that was a sour note. That was a wrong thinking. That was not you. I wasn't practicing Christ. I was practicing my flesh. Well, I don't want my flesh to get stronger. I want Christ to be stronger in me. And so I think it deals really strongly with condemnation if we can view our walk with Christ as I am practicing my faith. And when it comes to offense, and again, these last couple of months, I feel like I've had a stronger attack of opportunities to be offended, and I have not been, there have been times where I'll be in the middle of it, and you kind of just wake up, you kind of like shake your head and be like, wait a second, what am I doing? Like, I know I have the tool.
Our mics got cut off because the batteries were low.
The importance of just recognizing that it's not about getting everything exactly perfect right now. Paul even said, I've not yet obtained, but I'm still pressing forward. Like I'm still got my eye on the goal and I'm going for it. So Christ-likeness is something that we daily practice. Like we're working towards it. So when we find ourselves realizing, oops, like I'm again waist deep in offense right now, that's when you address it. As soon as you recognize what's going on, that's when, what John Bevere talks about in this study, you can start applying those tools to stop being in offense. And so we don't realize, again, just how much offense affects our daily living until we have to look it square in the face and actually start labeling things as offense. Because if you're like me, I like to relabel things, make myself feel a little better. When we're talking about fear, being fearful, there was a time where I was like, no, I'm being wise. I'm being thoughtful. I'm being responsible.
Yeah.
All the while I am terrified. And none of it was based in faith, but it felt better as a Christian to label them those good things because you're supposed to be practicing, wisdom and discernment and all that. But if you don't have the tools to get out of those places of fear or offense, you kind of just get stuck and use whatever tools you have available. And so, but what this does is helps you, it kind of strips everything down and you have to face it, which is good. Again, it can be kind of painful. And there's the journey is different for every person, how they walk through getting out of offense. But just the hope of knowing that I don't have to live my life in the trap, in offense, and bearing the fruit of offense, that there is a biblical way to walk through life, and you can slay that offense as it comes in your life.
That's great. This is a tool that I think everybody needs. I'm excited for it.
It is. And my husband he's not quick to be offended. That's not a struggle of his. But whenever I was sharing with him this study, it helps him understand the battle I was going through. Because for someone who, if that's not a big deal, they're kind of like, just what's the big deal? Like, just
Don't be offended.
Don't be offended. Yeah. And
Easier said than done for some, I guess.
well, again, if you don't have the tools to get out of it, it's impossible is what it feels like. And so it was helpful for him to have the understanding of what my struggle was and where I was so that he could be that counterbalance of saying, okay, now if you're saying you're offended, you remember what you need to, walk through it with me and that kind of thing. So even if you're not a quick to be offended person, it's helpful to understand what's going on in the people around you so that you can help them walk through it.
Yeah.
If you're in a position to be able to do that, if you have that kind of relationship where you can be helpful.
Yeah, and you're going to have to be able to have that kind of relationship, because I can also see if you don't have that relationship, how it could offend somebody too.
And that's the tricky part of this, isn't it? It's true. Though.
Yeah, to point it out to them like, hey, you're offended. What?
By the way, no, there's right ways and wrong ways to do that. And I'm sure it would depend on the circumstance. But there are times where Ryan has been that blunt and it's like, ouch. Okay, yeah, well, maybe I have a right to be offended. And honestly, when it comes down to it, as believers, we don't have a right to be offended. Because when you look at Christ, what was his example? Of any human being who has ever walked the earth, who do you think had the absolute right to be offended?
Oh, that's a good one.
And he wasn't. There was an example of righteous anger, but I don't believe the Bible ever gives an example of righteous offense in the way that we walk out offense. So, when we start laying down our right to be offended, we realize that as believers, we don't have a right to be offended. So it's a great study that really helps tease all of that out and puts all of that into context a little better than maybe I'm getting across at the moment. But a lot of it comes down to expectations and expectations of what you expect out of other people, and how I realized I was doing that with Ryan. I was expecting things of him and never verbalizing any of that. And then I would become so hurt and offended when he didn't meet my made up expectations on him. And we do that with people in our lives all the time. We have expectations with the cashier. We expect them to treat us a certain way. We expect our kids to act a certain way. And so whenever all of that comes crashing down on us, we become offended and hurt, and then we react out of that. So it's one of those things that you can apply this to every relationship that you have. And if you're like me and you realize, oh, I am offended at pretty much everything, then it's really liberating when you realize I don't need to walk in that offense anymore. So it's good.
What is the root of being offended?
The root of offense, I think it may depend on the person or it may depend on the circumstance, but I do think it comes down to, expectations are such a huge part of offense because...
And what our society tells us.
You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the idea of if it's truth-based, well, then it's not really offense. There's a righteousness in that. That's righteousness. But this is a perversion of righteousness. This is just, I feel attacked, or I feel let down, or I feel disappointed. And so then it's those building blocks of a wall that we start to build up between us and other people of offense, and we start blocking people out. And so it's a weapon that the enemy uses that is just so widespread, and he can mold it into all these different expressions. And so sometimes we don't recognize it in the moment, and it takes a second, and then you're like, wait a second, this seems familiar. Oh, it's offense again. It just was packaged in a little different way.
So for somebody who's listening, who might be saying, well, hold on, it sounds like that they're just going to let everything in their life go. Okay? That's not what you're saying. You're not saying that. You have to be okay with disrespect.
So not being offended doesn't mean that you have no personal boundaries, or you can just let anyone do anything in your life. So what it is, it's in how we internalize things. So I can address someone's behavior and correct it. If something's being done in my home, I have the responsibility to address that. whether it offends them or not, that's up to them. But you do it in love and don't become offended in your own heart. But it's not about, right, letting anyone do anything they want against you or against your family or
Sure.
in that regard. But it is being intentional with the process you go through with people and not jumping to offense, because I cannot tell you how many times whenever someone will say something, my initial reaction would be to jump to offense immediately. And of course, in a marriage, you have the most time typically with your spouse. And Ryan works from home and we homeschool, so we're together all the time. And so there'd be times where I would jump to offense and he'd go, why did you automatically assume the worst in me and assume that I meant that? And it does. It comes down to self-preservation. You're trying to save yourself from hurt.
So this is more self-healing,
Yeah.
Taking care of yourself. You're still setting up boundaries. You're not just letting people walk all over you.
No, this is, so when you're intentional about not becoming offended, it means that you can interact with that other person with their best interest at mind. And now, again, if this is something that's affecting my family or, others, you speak it in love, but you can be very direct in that. And so I
like that.
Offense is how you internalize all of that. Because again, my husband, Ryan, he can address things and he's not offended by them. So it's the jumping to offense that is being addressed through all of this, and how we harbor those feelings of hurt
I like that. Yes.
and being angry or frustrated at people, and that produces the fruit of.
And I think that while this class can be, or this book, I should say, not class, that we are doing a class for women, but this book can be for anybody. I think as women, we can tend to take it more personal than men. My husband, he doesn't really get offended at much either. He's just so passive. He's just like, whatever.
Well, and I think you're going to find maybe even more attached to personality types than maybe gender, but there's a whole spectrum of differences in how people respond to things. And there's some people who are so chill, and it's like water off a duck's back. Like, it doesn't stick to them. So again, we're just wanting to get the tools into, those of us who are lean more towards struggling with offense, to have the tools to know that you don't have to live life stuck like that. So, but when I look at like my kids, you can tell even at a young age, we can become offended very quickly.
Absolutely.
And so to help kiddos understand how to process those emotions and not let them grow into like deep-seated like negative emotions of anger or resentment towards, siblings or other people. So as a parent, it's really helpful. And then I didn't realize it. Like I told you, when I initially did this study, I realized I was offended at everything.
Well, and I think that's being honest. And I think that if I'm being real and raw with you, I am too.
Well, I realized that my children, like if they didn't act in a certain way, I would be so deeply offended. I would be so upset because I had an expectation, right? It comes back to that. I had an expectation that they needed to behave a certain way. And if they didn't, I was like, oh my goodness, this reflects so bad on me. And how do I address this in the moment? And so then I would just get frustrated and you'd be offended. And so having this teaching, when it entered my life, I realized, okay, as a parent, you have to set expectations. That's part of our job as parents, is to train our children up in a way to meet godly expectations. Yes. So, but when you look at the Lord's example, the way he grows us up into things, he's not becoming offended at us. There's an offense towards sin, but not towards the children doing the sinning in that moment. So I had to separate my children practicing or maybe not practicing very well, the lessons that we had taught them, and to separate that and to correct it as an act and not as the child themselves.
Yeah,
So it was like,
that's
okay,
good.
like you made a poor choice with this. Do you know why? Do you know why that was a bad decision in this circumstance? And so then you can say, okay, well then how are we going to do it different next time? How do we need to think differently? Do you realize how you were thinking pretty selfishly about this circumstance? Do you see that? And so then we can say, okay, well, what does it look like to be loving towards your brother? What does it look like to be kind or, thoughtful towards whoever else it might be? So then you give them tools to not jump to offense. You give them the tools to practice the right response. And that's what this whole study is doing. It's saying we need to relearn some things. And our go-to in life, if it's offense, then we need to crucify that, lay that down. But there's something better. There's a better option out there. So
Yeah, no, I really like that. And to understand that everybody is their own person. And we're all just trying to survive.
well, and to reflect Christ is the goal. So what does that mean? What does that look like? And then how we are all on a different place in our journey towards that goal as believers. And so, it's not right for somebody who has walked this journey for their whole life to turn around and not show grace to someone who's just getting in. So the Lord has standards, but it's in love, right? There's boundaries. The Lord has boundaries, but to just simply become offended at people, like, I can't believe that they did that. They've been in the church for 5 years. They should know better. Instead, recognizing again that discernment of saying, I don't know if they see it. And so then you intercede, you take it to God first, but then you say, Lord, how can I help? Like, how can I help them see this? Because it's, again, not helping them. And, it doesn't reflect Christ,
And how many times if we, ask God to help them see it, will he help us see it?
Right. Well, that's the example that I had was that I was so focused on being right that I wasn't being loving. Yeah. And when you look in scripture, it says, obviously we're supposed to pursue truth. Obviously we're supposed to live and recognize truth, but he calls us to be love. Mm-hmm. They will know them by their love. And so it's not a tolerance in the world's definition of tolerance. That's not the kind of love we're talking about. But the kind of love where it's like, I care about you. Like, I care about the way you walk with the Lord, not just to be a control freak, but to say, I want to come alongside you, and I want to see growth in you. Sure. And I want to be able to turn around and say, look, the Lord, I have this revelation, this understanding that I didn't have, and boy, I wish I had it 5 years earlier than I did, 10 years earlier, And so to be that iron sharpens iron and to help one another through this life, and not just to survive, but to grow and thrive and really be an example of kingdom here on earth. So it's a process, because we need it both directions. We need to be encouraged and we need to be encouragers, So it's that whenever I was talking with Cheryl about doing these Bible studies, and we had talked about doing the bait of Satan first, and then I found that he had a lot of material now on the awe of God, on the fear of God. Is like, no, we have to start with that one first, because it helps put things into alignment, like your perspective of why am I doing this? And it's to be honoring towards the Lord. And so, and then I was like, but we have to do the bait of Satan next. Like this is not a either or, like we're going to do both.
Yes.
We want to start with the fear of God and then do the bait of Satan, because again, there's just so much that offense will rob from our lives if we continue on in it. So it's the kind of study, like I said, that I picked it up probably, I think 2017, around that time, end of 2017. And it has been a constant since then. It's not something a one and done kind of a study.
It's a book that you have in your home that you practice all the time.
It's the kind of book where it's like, I need to refresh my heart. Like you can kind of feel, you start finding yourself struggling with offense a little more than usual. It's like, wait a second, I'm forgetting some truth here. Hold on. I need to bathe myself in the word. I need to remind my soul, what the truth is. And so it's that refreshing of, okay, I have the tools to walk in this truth because the Holy Spirit's given us the ability to walk in the truth. And so it's one that I've referred back to so many times because of how impactful it has been in my life. And Ryan would attest to that too. He's like, yes, life is better now. Life is so much better. Because, when you are an offended person, the way someone breathes can offend you. The way that they're there or not there can offend you.
Tell my husband that. He's really going to want me to do this.
The way that when you harbor offense, when you have cultivated a life of offense, it doesn't matter what someone does. They could do it the right way. But if you already have a lens of offense, they will never do it correctly. Nothing will ever be right. So I was so unsatisfied in my life. I was in so much turmoil because I never trusted.
Was this in your marriage as well? I mean, was this just in every aspect of your life?
It just touched everything. And so there is, all of our early years being married, I struggled with this. And then Ryan, bless his heart, he was so patient. And he would say, there were a lot of things he would go back and do differently, but you mature and you grow together. That's part of it. But recognizing my part in it, like what did I bring to the table? And I brought a lot of offense. And it wasn't even warranted necessarily, because you can take an offense. I can have an offense against someone else and it'll bleed over into the way I treat my family.
I agree 100%.
So it's one of those things where you know when you've run into somebody who practices offense, because it truly, you can't do anything right. No matter what you do, it'll be wrong. So it's realizing that we can be those people. I don't want to be that person. So I don't want to practice offense.
That's powerful. So I hope that anybody listening know that you can come to our class, to our Bible study, I should say. I keep saying class. It's because I have you teaching this every single Friday for the next 4 years. You're just our new teacher, Maggie.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm always happy to pass along
knowledge. Yeah. And I'm watching you, and I know nobody else can see you, but I just see the passion while you're talking. And one, you're vulnerable with the listeners, but even watching you right now, like I'm excited because, watching how this has changed you, and you're vulnerable with all of us. You have admitted how you were so. You took offense to every little thing, from your marriage to how you interacted with everybody. I mean, everybody we come in contact with, that's a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, and to be able to admit that and be vulnerable with us, like, thank you.
Oh, well, again, I feel like the whole purpose of testimony, the whole point of us, we become believers, we don't just go straight to, the Father's side in heaven, is that our stories are important to share, because it's not about, look what I've done or I've learned. It's saying, this is so vitally important.
Yes.
And I want to share the same victories, because the way I see the Christian life, it's not about just sitting in the pits together.
Ooh,
it's important.
Yes.
Like, you need to have someone in those low places. But I want someone who's going to help me get out of those pits.
Well, you are who your friends are. So, so if you listen to my podcast, or you're friends of mine, or you listen to me at all, one thing, or you listen, or you read any of my writing, I say 100 times over and over and over again, something I tell my children: you are who your friends are. If you want to show me your life, show me your friends.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying this.
Yeah.
You want friends who are going to hold you accountable.
Yep. And it's all fueled by love. It's not about
Yeah.
just bashing each other over the head. It's the point of, I love you enough to say, let's practice this. Let's do this together. Let's go. We got a common goal. If we say we're believers, we have a common goal. We want to be like Christ. And there are times I can't see, I'm blind to things in my own life. And so to have someone who I know loves me and is coming from a place of love, then you can take the hard truths and not be offended by them.
It's part of growth.
It is. And so it's so important though that we do as believers. It has to come from a place of love and a place of, I care for you.
Yeah.
This isn't just growing up. I'll tell on myself here too. Again, this is why stories are, it's worth telling the vulnerable parts, because it's not just about relating to somebody, but it's like there's starting points, but let's not stay at the starting point. Like there's a path before us. Let's journey down it. Now we might be at different speeds, but let's move forward.
You can't stay put. Yeah.
Well, growing up, my younger brother and I didn't always get along because I wanted to mother him and he wanted none of that. And so he wasn't too keen on our mother mothering him, let alone his older sister mothering him. Like I was way more than what he bargained for. So I was very much a rule follower, like do the right thing. Because one, I was motivated by, I don't want to disappoint my parents. Like that was a big deal for me. It's like, you just do the right thing so you don't get caught. Like, I don't want to be in the wrong because I hate that feeling of disappointing my parents. But Ted didn't have that same care. He wasn't driven by the same things as I was. But I was really hard on him. I was right, but I wasn't very loving. And so I would beat him over the head with that, that's wrong, or this is right, or that's right, but I wasn't coming from a place of, because I loved, like I cared for how this would affect him. It was a place of like, just get in line. Like it's that control thing. Like just do it because I told you to do it. And so that created a rift. That's not a healthy perspective. That's not a healthy thing for me either. Like I wasn't doing it in the right way. And, we had to come around full circle as adults and say, I had to go to him and say, look, forgive me for all the times that I was more focused on being right than loving you. And it doesn't change the truth. It doesn't change the fact that, no, you shouldn't throw a rock at a window. Doesn't change the fact that that's, that's true. You shouldn't do that. But my motivation was so off base. My motivation was so self-centered, and the fruit was bad. So it matters that when we walk in this truth, that we do it with the right center. And the center is love for the other person, and not just to be proven right or for our own selfish reasons of feeling good about ourselves because we were right. So it's really important that, again, whenever you're talking about offense, the reason, the point of why we're becoming offended or we feel so right about ourselves, we got to get that in check. We got to make sure that we're not doing this from a selfish perspective, because that changes everything.
Yes. No, that's good. So moving along, you talk about like your family. Let's talk about that a little bit. Did your parents, you said your mom bought you this book. Why? Have you ever asked your mom why?
Well, she read it all those years ago, and I don't remember exactly the way it got into her hands. I know that she was attending a lot of Bible studies at church, and she had some wonderful teachers that she was under, and so I think it was probably one of those avenues. I'd have to ask her again. So I know she had read it. Goodness, I don't remember when it was actually like published, but it was, again, a couple of years, I was still fairly young, I feel like, whenever she had the book for the first time. And so then as I became a young adult and I was out on my own, and she's just kind of like, would you like this?
Yeah.
And I knew what it was about, and we had talked about it. My mom, we did a lot of talking, and so, I understood the book and what it was teaching. But yeah, it hung out on my shelf. And one of the things with, I would say, just sin in general, is that when we become really comfortable with it, we don't tend to want to part with it. So we kind of want to keep truth that's going to peel back the facade of it's okay. We kind of keep it at arm's length typically. And so I was comfortable with my offense. And again, I downplayed it. I didn't think it was that bad. It's like, well, I don't get that offended. It's not that bad.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, that's not really for me. I'll be gracious and take the book, kind of thing. And I'll read it someday. And, but again, any little thing that we're practicing that is not of God, that's sinful, we need to get it out of our lives and stop practicing it. So, I'm really grateful that the Lord prompted me to, hey, why don't you pick up that book that's gathered 8 years worth of dust on it, and let's grow a little, shall we? So, yeah.
Yes. No, I'm excited. Well, Maggie, thank you for being on the podcast. And you guys are going to be hearing so much more from Maggie. We have so much in store. So, but we won't get into that right now.
Yeah.
Maggie is going to be doing many more podcasts with me, and probably just on her own as well.
Maybe, I'll have to get a little training, get you to teach me the ropes on some of these things.
We have a round table, and we're looking for a name for it.
Yep.
But Maggie is just a wonderful person, and I'm excited. Please, if you want to join us for the Bait of Satan, join us starting March 7th at 1 p.m., 811 Owen Mill Road, Stockton, Missouri. We look forward to seeing you. And again, thank you for joining our podcast.